let me just say that in Ecclesiastes, isn't it written that there is a time and a season for everything? And it is no accident that here it is autumn, and we are looking at healing those wounds that allow the past to haunt us. And we don't want our past to haunt us. That said, if any of you are familiar with the medicine wheel, and remember, a lot of people attribute that to Native Americans, but actually it was around way before them. But we'll give them credit for today. If you're familiar with the medicine wheel, autumn is the time to go into the west. And the west is a time where we go into, if you want to call it the darkness of our
Interior souls.
interior soul, you can call it that. But again, this is why we're doing this particular webinar now, because we want you to go into that cave where it is dark and see what we need to illuminate and how we can help to heal it. What I always suggest is that if you are going into this cave, and by the way, the totem for the cave is the bear, so the bear will have no problem navigating in there. When you do this, it's always good to put a guardian outside your cave. It can be a person, an angel, a spirit guide, whomever you wish. So I would ask you to think about that as we begin to give you a little bit of background and begin you into this journey. Okay, we're going to give you just a tiny bit of background. Stay with us, and then I'm going to give you the 3 most important points for this class. And just to let you know, you guys know that we do curriculum up at Yin Yang, and after having like 15 pages of notes and curriculum, I said, what are we doing? Let's just teach the full class. So that's why we're teaching the class in January. Needless to say, I don't think we're going to get to all of
But
this,
you're gonna get it.
but you will get the
Really-
3 most important things you need to know.
Gonna get a
Okay.
really good chunk to it.
Go for it, Dr. Grace.
All right. So today we're talking about being wounded and growing up anyway. Really important concept. One of the most primary signs of emotional healing is the ability to be connected intimately and to stay connected intimately, to be vulnerable, to be open, and to spend more time in openness and vulnerability and less time in defensiveness.
Little research partner here, loves research. Let's go backward for a minute. When I talk about a wound, what exactly are we talking about? Going under the assumption that you didn't have the most perfect childhoods, because there was no manual given to your mother, father, or whomever raised you, let's assume there was a little bit of neglect. Maybe you had some abandonment issues. Maybe you actually had some abuse, right on down the line. When I'm talking about wounds, I want you to know that what we're presenting to you, please don't think I underestimate the pain and the power of a wound. I'm not going to compare, a little abandonment with major abuse. It's a wound. It impacts you based on your archetypal makeup, and we need to deal with it, okay? So what happens when you get wounded? Your higher self, if you will, becomes fragmented. Why? Because the part that hurts, we have to shove it over there, compartmentalize it, because it hurts. I mean, I don't go over and put my hand on the stove because it hurts. So I put the stove over there. I don't want to have that bleed into my life all the time. So what does that do to you when you get fragmented? It means you're not operating on full power. You are not operating at your full potential. You are not operating with all your gifts and talents because there's a piece of you over there. Fair? When you are wounded, what happens? You can have excessive fear. Okay? And you know how I feel about fear. It's actually excessive anxiety. Fear is more something that protects us intuitively. But you'll be anxious all the time, right? This is one of the symptoms, if you will, of a wounding. You'll have excessive shame or guilt. Things that don't bother someone else will put you into a tailspin. And you might even obsess a little bit with that shame or guilt. Okay, so far we have two things that are taking away from the full you. Fair?
Shame, guilt, and anxiety.
So far, I call it you're haunted by your past. Literally, you're haunted by your past. You want to use a different reference? It's like an albatross around your neck. And who wants to carry a dead bird? I have to use these references to make sure you're with me. So when I watch your faces, it's like, oh, they got that one. They didn't get that one. Okay, she's with me, she's not. Okay, good. What else can happen? Well, you could have trust issues. I know, you're all thinking, oh yes, it would be so hard for me to trust people. Uh-uh. Oh yes, it would be so hard to trust myself. Uh-uh. How about you over-trust people and you get yourself into difficult situations? So wounding can cause trust issues. Suzanne? Yeah, as Robert De Niro says, I'm talking to you. Okay?
Me?
Just, yes, you.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
everything you said, I'm like, just resonates completely with
good.
me.
And one of the other things that's really important is you can have something, officially we can call it reality distortion, okay?
I like that.
Now, I'm not saying you're schizophrenic, but in my world, what I call it is you make up some stories in your head and it becomes your mythological
Reality.
reality. And that is a difficult situation. Whether you are telling yourself, I'll always be alone, I'll never fall in love, whatever your story is, I'll hurt forever,
I'm not
I-
worthwhile, I
I
don't
can't
deserve,
trust
I'm not
people.
enough.
And it becomes a myth, and we can trace these myths, because there are only X amount, in literature, and we can find your story very easily. Does that make sense? And then what happens when you have this story based on the law of attraction? If I decide that I am not worthy of a good relationship, I will attract what I call a rat bastard into my relationship world.
Or attract a nice person and turn them into a rat bastard because of the way that you treat them, because you just know they're gonna let you down. I've seen that happen.
And if the wounding goes too far, you can actually have difficulty with empathy, either too little or too much. And then you empathize so much that we can't distinguish, are these my feelings? Is that my heart feeling that? Or is that hers or his or theirs? Okay? You can see all of these, I'll call them distractions, can take away from you. So, you want to become whatever you want to become, a great mother, a great videographer, a great writer, a great daughter, a great whatever, no can do, because it's all over here with that hot stove. So we need to fix that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Another way to say it, and remember, I'm not making a judgment on any wounds. You really have to hear that. Because of course wounding impacts how you hear. It impacts how you speak, which is what Rebecca was speaking about, the triggering. How you speak to someone also impacts how you hear. You can hear with triggered ears. And I love you can sound completely different. But the wounds will make you oversensitive to things that, again, other people don't even notice. They don't even notice. But to you, it becomes earth-shattering. And that's what I mean when I say your past, your wounding, will haunt you. Does that make sense to you? Yes, we're good?
Mm-hmm.
So, remember I told you there were 3 very important things that you need to glean from this class. And if you understand those 3 things, you'll be ready for the full-fledged class in January and make great gains today. Let's just talk for a moment about your myth, if I may, because we're talking about going into the cave, and in that cave, we are going to take a look-see, and whoopsie whoopsie, we're not going to like what we see. So your little myth that I'm looking at is, maybe I could call it the magical talisman. Isn't a talisman something that creates a little magic in your life? A little help, right? So your magical talisman, if you could just find that, you and your mother would be just like that. I want you to go into the cave and find out. So remember, one of the 3 important things I told you was a battle between the ego and the spirit. The spirit will not lie to you in that cave. Your ego will be hurt. Your ego will feel betrayed by your mother. Your ego will want to be right, but I am a good daughter. Your ego may even want vengeance. Oh, don't give me that little sweet, really? Yes, really, my darling. Yes, my darling. With your mom. You don't expect to be protected because nobody was there protecting you when you were younger. So you go out and you, let me speak psychological, you overcompensate by being rigidly in charge and in control to make sure everything works the way it's supposed to work, to make sure everything's done the way it should be done, to make sure you take care of yourself and those under you the way you need to, and you never breathe and you never relax because it's always, what do I have to do? I'm on the lookout. Okay? That is your past haunting your present.
And we know that when people react with criticism or defensiveness chronically, that it bodes badly for the long-term life of the relationship. We know these things. But what we didn't always know until much more recently was how to help people when they are triggered like that. Because quite honestly, in my thinking, if we took out the problems of triggering and its aftermath in relationships, we could probably improve all relationships, parent-child, partners, friends, Congress, business. We could probably improve all relationships dramatically by at least 85 to 90%. It's a huge number. So
Wait a minute.
it's something that's real. About, in the 1990s, it was estimated that about 55% of the world's population has what's called a secure attachment. It means that, and you can see it in infants. You start testing in infants because that's where it's laid down in the first 36 months. Actually, it probably starts embryonically. And the way that an infant reacts when her mother leaves the room and a stranger comes back in, and then the mother comes back in, the way that the infant reacts to all of that tells you how the infant is attached to his or her mother. 55% of the population was estimated to have what's called a secure attachment. It means the baby is upset when the mother leaves, happy when the mother comes back, and then after a period of time adjusts and returns to playing. It means, okay, I'm safe and now I can go play again. You guys know the definition of play is spontaneous behavior that occurs in the presence of safety. So we look at play as indicative of safety in animals and infants and, in fact, in adults. The startling part of the research is that it left 45% of the population, and that's estimated to have probably increased quite significantly in the last 20 years for many reasons. 45% of the population with a distorted, disturbed attachment response. And remember, it starts in infancy. It can be ambivalent. It can be avoidant, where the infant just dismisses the parent when she comes back. It's like, you're not important to me, so I don't care if you're here or not. And it can be conflicted, which is really tough because the infant yearns for the longing, yearns for the comfort, yearns for the attachment, and yet the mother reacts in a cruel, harmful, or frightening way. Very, very common with addictive behaviors, child sexual abuse, trauma. So the child, the baby, develops what's called this conflicted attachment, yearning, yet the source of yearning is also the source of pain and fear. And that messes up the brain. It just trust me on this one, it messes up the brain. And remember that these statistics have probably shifted quite a bit in the last 20 years. I think we have much more insecure attachment in the world than we've ever had before. One piece of very, very positive news is that with therapy, with going back and refeeling these feelings and working them through, people can develop, adults can develop what's called an earned secure attachment. Basically, it means they can they can heal through the pain to a place where they know they are safe, wanted, they can trust, they can give and receive love, and thus tend to find others who also are securely attached and give and receive intimacy. And it's tremendously hopeful, and powerful in our resiliency that we have as humans. We're amazing human beings.
Does that make sense to you guys? Let me talk about something you touched on. Addictive behavior. I know we all talk about drugs and alcohol and sex and food and all of that's addictive behavior. But you too have addictive behavior based upon your wounding. So the addictive behavior can be beating yourself up, doubting that anyone loves you, falling into a spiritual abyss. It is addictive behavior. So if you take one of your addictive behaviors, and everybody has them, and you go into the cave and you take a look and say, okay, Rick, now when do I go into that spiritual abyss? And how do I get there? And how long do I stay? And what does it feel like? And what do I do when I'm there? You start to uncover what is happening. Does that make sense to you? That will change your present. And that will begin to heal your past. Does that make sense? But you have to know what gets you there. What brings you to melancholy? Brings you to a place of melancholy? What brings you to a place of feeling you don't deserve? What brings you to a place? You are addicted to, I'm going to say, painful experiences. Because you have to create them to support your myth. And your myth was a way of stepping away from the original wound. Does that make sense? So if you just work with me here and say, okay, I'm going to work with her and say, I have an addiction. And we're not going to choose drug, alcohol, sex, gambling, or food. You have to pick something else. Everybody give me an addiction. Looks on your faces. What symptoms do you display when you are in your addiction? We could say someone addicted to food would compulsively eat or eat mindlessly. Okay? That would be a symptom. What symptom do you display when your addiction comes up? Do you become frantically busy to run away? Do you become melancholy and just retreat from the world, or your friends? Do you become, do you have the same tape running over and over in your head? Do you beat yourself up by not allowing you to enjoy the day or not allow you to do something that you do like to do, like take a walk? Do you blame someone else? What is the symptom of your addiction? I'm going to give you a fourth point that's important. The story in your head of why would anyone want to love me or to love me? And of course, obviously, it originates in a childhood wound. Remember, the idea is not to go into the cave, feel a little bit about this, and then try to go into a spiritual place that says, oh, but wait, there are people that love me. That's not actually true. I don't have to think that anymore. I don't have to wonder. No, no, no. Remember, I began and I said that when we are wounded, a piece of us is fragmented. We put it over there for a reason. We want you to go through this addiction, feel what's going on, and be with it. That's the way you call that piece back. If you go directly into a spiritually groovy place that says, wait a minute, it's just a story, it's only a myth, I actually am loved, you are repressing it one more time. So it takes several times in that cave to go through that addiction before you can really sit with it. And then, and only then, is the time that you can call your angel in to say, okay. And then let your angel speak to you to say, you know what, you actually are loved.